All right, instructors, it is time to have a little heart-to-heart about one of our favorite cues that we like to say over and over again in our lesson, and it is something that if you walk out into any lesson barn, you will probably hear it within 5 minutes. And that cue is look up or look where you're going. And I want to talk to you about why this cue is pretty much useless unless you have done a few key things as an instructor to build this cue and make it something that is effective and your student actually has built the skill to understand how to do this cue. Because yes, look up and look where you're going is a skill that we need to teach our students how to do. It's not just something that people naturally do just because they're a human. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Sabra. I'm the owner and founder of Hoof Falls Footfalls. And through Hoof Falls Footfalls, I am on a mission to help educate, equip, and encourage fellow horseback riding instructors around the globe. And those instructors not only teach traditional lessons, but also adaptive, or also called therapeutic horseback riding lessons. So teaching to students that might have a physical, cognitive, or emotional diagnosis, or just different learning needs in general. And by the way, you can thank the members of the Intuitive Instructor Club for this video or podcast if you're listening to it as a podcast, because thanks to that membership, I am able to bring free content to you like this. And if you like this type of content and you feel like it's made you a better instructor and be able to teach students better, no matter if it's traditional or adaptive, make sure you check out the Intuitive Instructor Club, intuitiveinstructorclub.com. There's a whole growing video library in there that covers volunteer management, horse management, tack and equipment, mounts and dismounts, teaching theory, biomechanics, lots of fun stuff in there. There's a great growing community where we meet monthly and talk together online. And there's also a template database, review quizzes, and certificates of completion. And I know that if you join as a member, you are gonna absolutely love the content. Hey instructor, really quick, before we jump into this super important topic on land your look, I do wanna tell you to check the comments down below. There is a link to a freebie download as a thank you for spending your time with me. This download will be sent right to your email inbox, and it has something for you as the instructor, something for your students, and then something for your wonderful lesson program horses. So I hope you enjoy those downloads. Thank you again for your time. I'll remind you at the end of this video, but wanted to tell you about this little freebie for you before we get into the meat of our discussion here. All right, let's start talking about why look up or look where you're going is pretty much a useless cue or an ineffective cue unless you've done some key things. So I have taught both traditional and adaptive riding lessons now professionally for almost 18 years, and I cannot tell you how many years I wasted not understanding these important steps I needed to take to actually make a cue like look up or look where you're going, or just look or eyes, actually be effective and get a change in my students. I have said this cue thousands and thousands of times, and it was so frustrating, like, the student, why can't they get it? Why aren't they listening? And honestly, it was because as the instructor, I wasn't necessarily setting them up for success and making sure that they knew how to do this skill themselves. Because looking where you're going when you're riding, even though that seems like a very common sense thing to us as instructors, and how do you not know where you're going in the arena? That is actually something we need to teach our students how to do. Where do they actually look? What does that mean? How far ahead are we looking at what object? Is it our horse? Is it a fence? What is it? So I want to go ahead and give you some tips and tools that were a complete game changer for me as an instructor and help me be able to say, look where you're going, or look, or eyes, and it actually create a result in my students. So I call this the land your look technique for instructors. And the land your look is also followed by like a 3-step progression phase where you are going to work your students towards independence in this cue. So you hopefully have to say it less, and you're not out there yelling, look up, look where you're going all the time. And that 3-step phase is going to be give, ask, and catch. So I want to explain to you what land your look is, and then we're going to go into how we can progress our students of them actually doing this on their own with that give, ask, and catch. So land your look, what do I mean by that? As instructors, a lot of times when we are saying, look where you're going or look up, we clearly have it in our brains where we want our students to go. So say, for example, I want my students to go over these poles, and I know look where you're going means look either, if they're far out, I want you looking at that center red point in the middle of the pole or the cavaletti, or it could be that no, we're close enough to those items where we need to be looking out past it to that blue cone. I know that in my brain, and I think my student knows, oh, you're looking at that pole, or nope, we're looking past it and out to the cone. But so many times as instructors, our students don't actually know where to look. And we, as the instructor, need to finish that cue of look where you're going by landing the look. So we need to tell them exactly where we want them looking at that phase or at that location in their riding. And then, following it up with a why is like that pro tip that would follow it. And because that's going to build a thinking, more independent student that's going to be able to progress through that give, ask, catch later on and progress towards more independence. So as my students coming around the arena and I'm wanting them to get eyes on this pole and cavaletti set, instead of just saying, well, look where you're going, look at the cavaletti or look at the pole, that's not a complete sentence where I'm landing my look. So landing my look would sound something like, all right, as we're coming around and you're getting ready to go over the poles, I want you looking towards the middle red section of the very last pole or of the middle cavaletti, kind of whatever I need to, wherever I actually want their eyes to be. I can get very specific. Making this more simple, so maybe having one pole out or just the cavaletti out could be something I might need to do for a student who's just learning and entering into this skill of looking where you're going or looking up, right? So when we're then going over that pole and I see them looking at the pole, I'm gonna catch them and say, yep, good job. I see your eyes are looking on the middle of that pole. Look, your horse is centered up. Your horse feels where you're looking. Okay, now as we're getting closer, I want you to look ahead, look forward to the blue cone so that our horse knows we're going past those poles, because if we look down, we're gonna lose our balance. Our horse might drift to the side because we're leaning off to the side. There's tons of different whys that you can give your student on why we're shifting look where you're going from looking at the middle red section of our polar cavaletti to now looking to that blue cone. So it's super, super important for us as instructors to land our look cues and actually verbalize to our students where they need to look. So land your look. And that is then going to help build our students and build their brains to grow this skill and be able to hopefully do it on their own so that we can progress them towards more independence and shift it from the give phase of this progression, which is what I just was describing here as I was giving them where to look and the whys, to then I'm going to ask them where they're looking. When I say, all right, I want you looking ahead and planning ahead. Where are you going to look as you're coming and getting ready to go over the poles and cavalettis? And then as they're approaching the poles and cavalettis, okay, we're coming close to those poles and cavalettis. Now, as you're going over them, where are you gonna look? And hopefully they're gonna answer, at the blue cone, or maybe even better, out towards a tree or a bush that's further out there. So that's that ask phase. I'm seeing if the student is actually understanding where they need to look. Because, oh, I'm looking at the jump or the cavaletti. Well, where? Because if I'm looking at the white X's on the end, my horse is going to go to the white X's on the end. If I'm looking at the red in the middle, or even the blue and white striping in the middle, that's going to get my horse a little bit more centered. So looking at the cavaletti or looking at the pole, those can have very different outcomes depending on where we're looking. So that's why we as the instructor need to first give the cue and help our students learn how to land the look, and we're landing where we want our students to look. Then we shift to asking our students where they should be looking as they're doing whatever activity it is. And yes, I'm using the poles and the cavalettis and a cone as an obstacle for an example out here, but this should be something that we're doing even if I have a completely empty arena and I'm wanting my rider going down the rail and then through a corner. They should be giving me something very specific out in the arena on that fence line or just outside of my arena rail that they're looking at. So maybe for those of you that have nice indoor arenas, you know, a specific exit sign or a tree or a barn, something specific more than I'm looking towards the fence in front of me or I'm looking at the corner. That's why cones, barrels, letters in our arena, these are super, super important to set us and our students up for success and clear communication during our lessons. So that progression towards the independence of I'm giving them the cue by landing my look cue to the student, then we're phasing into asking them where they should be looking when I give that cue to look where you're going. Then the final phase that you can kind of sprinkle in even from the get-go, if you see it happening, is catch. And that is catch them looking in a very specific spot of where they're wanting to go. So say your student is doing a walk-on and they're going along the rail and you're talking about doing a halt at the next blue barrel and you see their eyes shift and lock on to that item that they're going to be walking to, catch them and say, hey, really good job looking at that blue barrel. You were already looking ahead, planning ahead before I even had to remind you to look where you're going. So catch them doing that look and look where they're going independently and well and being accurate about it. Make sure you're praising them accurately though, and that they are actually looking where they need to be going. And as your students progress and get more independent, not only in this skill themselves, but in riding in general, you can get more and more picky on exactly where you want your student to look to really refine how they're riding their horse, because the steering and the communication with our horse should be starting from our body first, which includes where we're looking, before we go to hands and even leg cues, because our hands and our legs should follow our look and our body and our seat. So super, super important to build in all of our riders, and especially our students who have a disability or a diagnosis. They might have limited verbal communication, they might have limited strength. Looking where they are going and learning how to lock on to that item is the very first step that we need to really get built into them to teach them how to direct their horse, steer their horse on where to go before we jump into reining for steering. Telling their horse where to go needs to come from that look first. And yes, our students can absolutely do it, even if they have a disability or a diagnosis. So, little recap here. We talked about landing your look as the instructor. So landing your look where you're going cue with telling them specifically where you want them to go. And then we talked about how to progress them towards independence and make sure that the student actually has the skill of knowing where to look and us not just assuming that they know how, by taking them through that progression of give, ask, and catch. So we're giving them where to look, we're asking them where they're looking, and then we're catching them when they're doing that on their own independently and being accurate. And a little bonus tip at the end here is be very careful about saying look up, especially if you teach students that are on the autism spectrum or take things very literally. That can happen not only in autism, but also other cognitive disabilities and diagnoses, because when you say look up, you might get this. And you can't get upset for your student at that because you told them to look up they followed the directions. You need to communicate better as an instructor. So I would actually recommend removing look up from your vocabulary as an instructor because it's really not an accurate cue. We want to look where we're going or look forward, but still, like I spent this whole video talking about, we can make those cues so much better, so much more effective, and make our students so much better, and our horses will thank us and thank them by being very specific and intentional about where we are landing our look cues or where our students are landing their own look when it's progressing on to them. So I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. Are you a recovering look up or look where you're going instructor? Is this a cue that you already use all the time and you haven't actually checked whether or not your student even knows where to look specifically? Have you just been assuming it? If that's been happening, that's okay. I did that for years. Totally get it. And it's something that, like, it's this light bulb moment of, oh, I get it now. I have been doing, maybe failing as an instructor. That's kind of what I felt like, and I can do better now. So let me know down below in the comments, was this helpful? And if you are a chronic look where you're going, look upper, which remember, we don't want to use look up anymore. Look where you're going, look forward, look, eyes, whatever it is. Then I want to hear how you have plans on how to make this cue actually effective and supportive for your students. How are you going to land your look moving into this next week of lessons? And how are you going to help progress your students through building that skill and becoming more independent by using our give, ask, and catch progression through teaching our students to look where they're going and be effective with that cue. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And also make sure you grab the freebie for instructors down below in the comments. And there's something in that download for you that I'll send to your inbox, and it's something for you, something for your students, and something for your wonderful lesson horses. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you on some of the live meetings in the Intuitive Instructor Club. We have lots of fun over there. If you are still in that free phase of wanting free information, which is totally fine, make sure you jump on my email list at hooffallsandfootfalls.com. Check out Facebook, lots of really fun quizzes and interaction and discussion going on over there. And you can always shoot me an email down below. All my contact info, website information is down below in the comments. So thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode.